whereas acquired or adaptive immune response takes some time to develop. Innate immune response has got low specificity, whereas acquired immune response has got a highly specific. It is only active against the organism which is causing the infection, because of which innate immune response has got a limited diversity, whereas the acquired immune response has got high diversity or highly diverse. Innate immune response has got no memory. I'll explain this a bit later, whereas acquired or adaptive immune response, the concept of memory is there. Finally, which is a slightly difficult concept to understand, innate immune response has got a blurred self-non-self distinction. We'll discuss it as we proceed, whereas acquired or adaptive immune response has got a clear self and non-self distinction. Okay? So let's proceed further. Now let's see one by one through basically a series of diagrams as to what we mean by each of these words, low specificity. So suppose innate immune response recognizes bacteria A. The same innate immune response would also be able to recognize bacteria B. Okay, so this is what we refer to as low specificity. Low specificity. Okay, is referred to as low specificity. On the other hand, if you see the acquired immune response or adaptive immune response, if organism A is causing the infection, the immune response would be specific for A and it will not work against B. Whereas if B is causing the infection, the immune response would be specific for B and not act against A. Okay, so cross protectivity is not there. Okay, so this is what we mean by highly specific. And with this is the intertwined concept of diversity. Innate immune response, because it can broadly recognize multiple pathogens through some common factor, it can act against A also and B also, but broadly recognize, okay, this is a bacterium, this is a fungus, this is a virus. It does not require high diversity. On the other hand, because acquired or adaptive immune response recognizes a specific antigen present on a particular pathogen, it has to recognize billions and millions of different types of antigens to be able to fight with different types of pathogens. So therefore, it has to be highly diverse because of the concept of specificity. So I hope you've got the point. Memory is another concept that we were talking about. So what is memory? Suppose organism A is causing the infection and you develop an immune response. The same organism A causes the infection again. The innate immune response that you're going to develop would be exactly the same as you developed in the first instance. So it could be first infection with A, second infection with A, or third infection with A. It is immaterial. The quality of the immune response that you are to get every time in case of an innate immune response would remain the same. Now what happens with acquired or adaptive immune response? Let's see. First time a particular pathogen causes the infection, you develop an immune response against that. It will be specific to that. Suppose it is, let's call it A, you develop anti-A. After a few months or years, when you recover from infection caused by A, the same organism causes the infection again. And then you again develop a specific immune response against A. Now the immune response that you're going to develop subsequently would be much better placed to fight the infection than the first time. So it will have a much higher magnitude. It will be a stronger immune response, and secondly, it will be much faster. So it will be a stronger immune response as well as a faster immune response. So this is referred to as the concept of immunity. Now give me the answer to this question, all of you are listening. The concept of memory is a feature of innate or acquired? Quick answer. I want a quick answer from you. If you are able to listen to me, quickly answer. I can see your answers. Quickly answer. The concept of memory is a feature of. I need to get some responses, then only I'll get a feedback whether you are listening or not. Quickly. Ananda, if you are there, please respond. I'll get to know. Seems nobody is responding. Please respond. So another feature, next we talk about self-non-self distinction. Innate immune response has got a blurred self-non-self distinction. The innate immune response can recognize self also as well as non-self also, and can actually damage both. Whereas the acquired immune response, it learns how only to recognize non-self, so that it can only fight against something which is non-self and does not damage something which is self. If your own immune response were to damage you, then it will lead to autoimmunity. So this feature is well ingrained into the acquired immune system. When the acquired immune system is developing, it learns to recognize non-self from self, and it learns to fight only against non-self and not against self. Okay. So this, just to recap the differences between the innate and acquired immune response, which we've already covered. Now let's talk about the question, which is more important? Innate immune response is more important, or the acquired immune response is more important? Please remember, the innate immune response is our first line of defense, whereas the acquired immune response is our second line of defense. It is our second line of defense. So therefore, whenever an invasion occurs by a pathogen, the first aspect of the immune response which kicks in is basically the innate immune response, whereas later on the acquired immune system kicks in. In fact, at some instances, you'll find that both of them are also acting together. So the question is whether the innate or acquired immune response, how do they relate to each other? Whether they work alone or they work together. Please remember, both are true. They work alone also, and they help each other out also. It's not as if they always work in isolation. Innate immune response as well as acquired immune response, they work alone also, and they work together also, and they in fact help each other out also. And then they become much more efficient. Now we'll talk about antigen recognition receptors, because if you have to recognize the pathogen, there has to be something present which will recognize it. So in case of an acquired immune response, there are specific antigens that are supposed to be recognized. There are millions and millions of different types of antigens that are there. Okay, so therefore the acquired immune response has to learn to recognize each of these separate antigens. Okay, so if there are infinite number of antigens that are to be recognized by the antigen recognition receptors of the acquired immune response, how many different antigen recognition receptors would be there? They would also be infinite. So there is almost an infinite power of developing antigen recognition receptors to recognize each of the different antigens of various pathogens. Now, what are these antigen recognition receptors? There are two main cells of our acquired immune response, the T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes. T lymphocytes on their surface have a receptor which is called as a T cell receptor, and in short referred to as TCR, which recognizes the antigen. Similarly, the B lymphocyte on its surface has got the antigen recognition receptor, which is referred to as B cell receptor. So the antigen recognition receptor of T lymphocyte is referred to as a TCR, whereas the antigen recognition receptor of a B cell is referred to as the B cell receptor or a BCR. And both of these collectively are referred to as antigen recognition receptors. And the body has got an infinite capability of generating these specific antigen recognition receptors. It is beyond the scope of this discussion how this infinite the capability arises. If you are interested, you can come over and I can discuss it with you separately. Now, this explains the high diversity of the acquired immune system that we've already been covered. Now, let's talk about the antigen recognition receptors in relation to innate immune response. In relation to innate immune response, these are referred to as pattern recognition receptors or PRRs. Now, as I said, innate immune response can broadly recognize the major group of pathogen, whether it is a bacterium or a virus or a parasite. It cannot tell you which one is which bacterium it is, which parasite is this, which virus is this, but then it can broadly say, okay, it is a bacterium, it is a virus. Innate immune response, therefore, recognizes the common conserved molecule, which is shared by various pathogens in one of the major groups. Okay, so it will recognize a common factor related to a bacterium, a common factor related to a virus, so on and so forth. And that's why it recognizes the pattern which defines a particular group of pathogens, and that's why these receptors are referred to as pattern recognition receptors. Pattern recognition receptors. And these patterns are referred to as pathogen-associated molecular patterns, or PAMs. And we're going to discuss the PRRs and PAMs in just a few moments. Okay. So these pattern recognition receptors are either expressed on the cell membrane or they are present intracellularly, and then they recognize the pattern defining a particular pathogen if it is causing an infection in a body. These pattern recognition receptors are expressed on various cell types, on white blood cells, lymphocytes, skin, mucosa, vascular endothelium, and most of the important pattern recognition receptors that you need to remember, which comes as a short note, more important for PGs, is a toll-like receptor, or TLRs. Toll-like receptors were one of the first pattern recognition receptors that were actually studied in detail. So we'll have a bit of a discussion on this. These were identified in 1980s in fruit fly, that is Drosophila, and they were involved in a normal embryonic development. Toll means a French word which means beard, a German word which means beard, and it was absence of the genes coding for toll-like receptors were associated with abnormal morphology of the fruit fly. So that's why the name weird was given to it. Later on, it was realized that they were involved in as pattern recognition receptors for innate immune response. These were discovered by Jules A. Hoffman, and for the discovery of toll-like receptors, we realized the importance of these receptors later on. He was awarded 2011 Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine. So this is the fellow, Jules A. Hoffman, who got 2011 Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine for this wonderful discovery. Now, there are in total 13 toll-like receptors that have been identified. These are simply referred to as TLR 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 till 13. I just mentioned some of these important ones. Like TLR2. TLR2 recognizes the peptidoglycan. Peptidoglycan, you would be knowing by now, is the cell wall of a bacterium. And in a gram-positive bacterium, it is exposed out. So TLR2 will recognize, therefore, all gram-positive bacteria. So it will identify gram-positive bacterium, but which gram-positive bacterium, whether it is Staph aureus, Streptococcus pyogenes, it cannot say. Okay. TLR3 recognizes the double-stranded RNA. Double-stranded RNA normally is never found. Double-stranded RNA is formed when the RNA viruses are replicated. So it recognizes broadly the viruses. TLR4 is extremely important. It recognizes the lipopolysaccharides. Lipopolysaccharides, as you would be knowing with your basic discussion in microbiology, are only found in gram-negative bacteria. So TLR4 therefore will recognize all gram-negative bacteria. Which one it is, it will not be able to say. Okay. Similarly, we've got TLR7 and 8, which recognize single-stranded RNA. Again, they recognize the viruses. And finally, TLR9, which recognizes what we refer to as CpG motifs. That is, in the DNA, C followed by G, cytosine and guanine. And this is particularly seen in bacterial DNA, high concentrations of C and Gs, one after the other. And this helps in identification of bacterial DNA. Therefore, it will be able to identify broadly a bacteria, but which one it is, it will not be able to tell. Okay? So, just a bit about toll-like receptors. Now we shift our attention to the mediators of innate immune response, how the innate immune response is mediated. Let's have a look at that. There are various mediators of the innate immune response. These are broadly classified into two categories, anatomical and physiological barriers, and then the cell-mediated innate immune responses. The anatomical and physiological barriers include skin, mucous membrane, and low pH, particularly the gastric pH, which maintains the low levels of organisms in the stomach. The cell-mediated is through various cells like neutrophils, eosinophils, monocytes, macrophages, and natural killer cells. Humoral mediators is the third category. Humoral mediators, humoral means a chemical which is dissolved in the liquid part of our body. So this includes lysozyme, C-reactive protein, interferons, complement system. The complement system I'm going to discuss later on. There is a separate topic in which we're going to discuss complement system. Rest of the others I'm going to talk about now. Before we talk about the cellular and humoral mediators, anatomical and physiological barriers we'll discuss a bit. Skin is the largest organ of our body. It forms a protective layer and does not allow the invasion of organisms. And we realize the importance of the skin only when it is not there. Like patient is a patient of burns, has got a cut on the skin. The most important thing that you really dread about is an infection. So we really don't care about the skin unless and until it is not there. But it is always there working for you, protecting you against the harmful environment, particularly microorganisms which may invade if the skin function is not properly maintained. Mucous membrane, particularly in the upper respiratory tract, gastrointestinal tract, it traps the organisms and then flushes it out to the entrapment within the mucous layer. Low pH, as I was mentioning, is present in the vaginal mucosa in women and also in the gastric acidity. This maintains the microorganism load at a very low level. And if there's an alteration in the pH, then you can get gastrointestinal tract infections and also diseases of the vagina or infections of vagina, that is vaginal. Now let's talk about the cellular mediators and humoral mediators in detail. Starting with the cellular mediators, neutrophils. As you are very well aware now, you are having your sessions in pathology also, is the most abundant of all WBCs. Okay, 60 to 70% of all WBCs are neutrophils. It's the first cell to reach the site of infection because of the sheer numbers. Because the huge number of cells which are there are neutrophils, they are the one which can reach the site of infection first. And that's why whenever a site is infiltrated with neutrophils, we call it as an acute infection because it is there for a short period of time only. And if the neutrophils are infiltrating the site, it means that the infection has been there for a short period of time. The function of neutrophil is basically the phagocytosis of extracellular bacteria, and they engulf the extracellular bacteria in a phagosome, which fuses with the lysosome, and this then leads to both oxidative and non-oxidative killing. In oxidative killing, reactive oxygen species are formed, which leads to the death of the organism. There are various other mechanisms of killing, like non-oxidative killing, where oxygen is not involved. Neutrophils have got a short lifespan, only 2 to 3 days. So either they kill the pathogen, or if they are not able to kill, they themselves get killed because of the short lifespan, and then they are removed from that site. Now, collection of the neutrophils at the site of infection can lead to formation of a gooey substance that you all might be aware of. That is pus formation. So, what is pus? Pus is nothing but the collection of neutrophils with dead bacteria ingested by these neutrophils. So, this is a case where the fight has occurred and the pathogen has died, and also the neutrophils have died. So, this gooey collection is referred to as pus. So, this is just to show the diagram. This is a neutrophil. Let's say an extracellular bacterium is causing the infection. It is taken in the phagosome. This phagosome fuses with the lysosome, which contains the enzymes, and you get phagolysosomal fusion, and this leads to the activation of the free radicals and oxidative and non-oxidative killing. Okay, this is just the scanning electron micrograph image. These are yellow-colored neutrophils, and these are, you can see, actually ingesting the pathogen. You can see it is engulfing the pathogen. It's a wonderful image, scanning electron microscope image, which actually shows you how the killing is happening. Now let's talk about this other cellular mediators of the innate immune response. These are eosinophils. Roughly about 1 to 6% of WBCs are eosinophils. The main action of eosinophil is anti-helminthic action. Remember, you had your general microbiology session. So helminthic parasites are important cause of infections or diseases in humans. So they mainly act against the helminths, like hookworms and roundworms and all. And how do they damage the large parasite? It is by production of a chemical which is referred to as major basic protein. Major basic protein. So the eosinophil releases the major basic protein, which causes the damage of the worm, and that's how it is able to act. Eosinophils obviously cannot eat up the helminth, because helminth is such big in size. Okay, so it releases these chemicals like major basic protein, which cause the damage of the surface of the organism. And that's why you'll find that in many of the helminthic infections, you get eosinophilia. So that's an indicator that probably the person might be suffering from a helminthic infection. Okay. Next, we come to monocytes and macrophages, very interesting group of cells. Monocytes and macrophages, as you are aware, constitute about 5% of all white blood cells. And most of these macrophages, they reside in tissues. Those macrophages which are circulating in the blood are referred to as monocytes. The ones which are residing in the tissue, they are referred to as macrophages. And in different tissues, they have been given different names. Like in liver, they are referred to as Kupper cells. In kidney, they are referred to as mesangial cells. Skin, they are referred to as Langerhans cells. Brain, they are referred to as microglial cells. So they are different names, but at the end of the day, they are the same cells, that is macrophages, that you need to remember, because they are different sites, different people discovered them, but later on we realized that they all are having the same function, that is macrophages. The main action of monocytes and macrophages is basically against the intracellular agents, intracellular infectious agents, and they act just like what we described for neutrophils by phagocytosis. Again, fusion, there's a phagosome which develops, which fuses with the lysosome, and this then subsequently leads to both oxidative and non-oxidative killing mechanisms. But the major difference between a macrophage or a monocyte vis-a-vis a neutrophil is lifespan. The lifespan of a macrophage is much longer. It is months to years as compared to that of the neutrophil. Hence, if they accumulate at the site of infection and you detect them through microscopy, it indicates it is a chronic inflammatory response, or acute as opposed to acute inflammation that we say for accumulation for neutrophils. Because these cells are long-lived and accumulate for a longer period of time. Accumulations of monocytes and macrophages are referred to as having a chronic inflammatory response, a chronic infection. Because these monocytes and macrophages cannot clear from the site and have a long lifespan, they form collections at the site of infection in the hope of killing the pathogen. And this collection is referred to as granuloma formation. So many of the intracellular pathogens, that is those pathogens which multiply inside our cells, you find these granuloma formation. A classical example of this is tuberculosis. And you will hear more about granuloma formation when we talk about tuberculosis later. Some of these macrophages and monocytes also function as antigen-presenting cells. I'm going to talk about them later on in the subsequent session, also referred to as APC. So this is just a histopathology of a granuloma. So these are the collections of majorly monocytes and macrophages, particularly macrophages, that have formed around this the infectious agent. So this is again a schematic diagram. So this is a collection mainly of the macrophages, and some B and T cells might also be there. And inside is basically the necrotic part which is there. Now we come to another cell of the innate immune response, a very important question that you get in your exam, especially a short note that you need to know. That is a natural killer cell. Natural killer cell is known actually by various other names. The large number of names by which it is being defined. It is also referred to as a null cell. Why it is called null actually means zero. It is called as a null cell because initially when lymphocytes were being identified, two major divisions, you could divide them into B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes, which we're going to shortly discuss. These cells actually could not be classified as either B or T cells. Hence, they came to be known as null cells. Okay, they came to be known as null cells. These lymphocytes are larger in size as compared to other lymphocytes. Hence, they also came to be known as large granular lymphocytes, or LGL. Okay, the classical CD molecule, which is there for the identification of these cells, is CD16 and 56. Now, what is CD? This will be taught to you in your pathology classes also. CD stands for cluster of differentiation. So cluster differentiation is basically the proteins which are used to identify immune cells, and they have been numbered CD1, 2, 3, 4. There are hundreds of them that have been identified, and some of the unique CD molecules are expressed on certain immune cells. And based on the distribution of these CD molecules, you identify a particular immune cell. Like in this case, CD16 and 56 is present only on NK cells. So if you identify CD16 and 56 on any cell, you identify that cell as an NK cell. Okay? Identify it as NK cell. This cell naturally kills our own cells, which have got decreased expression of surface MHC1. MHC will be again taught to you in your pathology classes. MHC stands for Major Histocompatibility Complex. There are three classes of MHC: class 1, class 2, and class 3. So NK cell senses MHC class 1 on the surface, and if a cell has got decreased expression of MHC1, it damages that cell. It also functions in a phenomena which is referred to as antibody-dependent cell-mediated cytotoxicity, or ADCC. So which we are going to discuss later on again. Now let's see how the NK cell acts. Now, this is the NK cell. This is the healthy cell. All cells, almost all cells of our body express MHC1, the protein expressed on the surface. It senses it and it decides not to kill it. If a cell, for some reason, has become our own cell, abnormal cell, and a very important reason for abnormality is if it is infected with a virus. For some reason, the expression of MHC1 decreases. NK cell senses that cell and realizes that it does not have MHC1 expressed on it, and that's the decision that it takes now to kill it. So this question you get: NK cell kills which cell? Cell which express MHC1 on their surface, or cell which has got a down regulation of MHC1 on its surface? So your answer will be what? Down regulation of MHC1. Down regulation of MHC1. Okay. ADCC is another phenomena which is shown by NK cell. This is the NK cell. Now this NK cell does not reach the abnormal cell on its own. Abnormal cell has got an antigen. This antigen is bound by antibody. The NK cell has got a receptor to identify this antibody, through which it then reaches the abnormal cell and kills it. And this therefore is referred to as ADCC, which stands for antibody-dependent cell cytotoxicity. This cytotoxicity is not on its own. It makes use of an antibody to reach the abnormal cell and then decides to kill it. In case of MHC1, it was direct killing. It was sensing the presence of MHC1. If it was finding MHC1, it was not killing it. If it was not finding MHC1, then it was killing. So that was the decision. If nothing else was required, here you require the antibody to be able to kill the abnormal cells. So this is referred to as ADCC, or antibody-dependent cell cytotoxicity. Now, once the decision is made by the NK cell to kill the abnormal cell, it releases two types of chemicals by which it kills: granzyme and perforin. Perforins, as the name suggests, it creates hole in the enemy cell or the abnormal cell, and through that hole, granzyme enters. And granzymes, they activate programmed cell death pathway leading to apoptosis. So perforins and granzymes are released by the NK cell once the decision is made by the cell to kill the abnormal cell. It makes the perforins, as the name says, perforin perforates, creates a hole in the cell surface through which the granzyme enters, and this then kills the harmful cell by activating programmed cell death pathway. The programmed cell death pathway is also called as apoptosis. This will be explained to you in your pathology classes. Okay. So a lot of questions you get on NK cells. So I suggest that you should be able to answer questions on NK cells. Now come to the humoral mediators of the innate immune response. So let's see various humoral mediators. Humoral means something which is dissolved in the blood. So these are the chemicals which are dissolved in the liquid part of our body, that is the blood and other secretions. So first, a humoral mediator we're going to talk about is lysozyme. Lysozyme basically has got an antibacterial action, and it mainly acts against gram-positive bacteria, and you'll realize why, because it damages the peptidoglycan cell wall. The peptidoglycan cell wall is exposed only in gram-positive bacteria, not in gram-negative. So therefore, it is accessible for damage with regard to the lysozyme. So the main action of lysozyme, therefore, is only against gram-positive bacteria because it causes the damage of the peptidoglycan cell wall, which is exposed in gram-positive bacteria, not in gram-negative. It is found in various secretions of the body, like tears, saliva, mucus. So these are the places where normally lysozyme is present. Lysozyme, therefore, will recognize gram-positive bacteria, but it will not be able to specifically recognize which gram-positive bacteria it is. Broad recognition है, specific recognition नहीं है. Hence, it is part of innate immune response. I hope you've got the point that I'm trying to make. because until and unless you understand what is innate and acquired, then only you'll be able to understand the rest of innate. Next, we come to interferons. Interferons are also part of the innate immune response. There are three types of interferons which are there: alpha, beta, and gamma. The main interferons that we're going to discuss are alpha and beta, which have mainly got an antiviral activity. So basically, antiviral activity. The alpha and beta interferon, they act not directly on the virus. They act on the virally infected cells. That is our own cells of the body in which the virus is multiplying. And they give signals to our own cell in which the virus is multiplying and inhibit the replication of that virus. Now, how do they inhibit the replication of the virus? By inhibiting the viral translation. Unless and until the virus is able to produce its own proteins, it will not be able to form more baby viruses. So what does the interferon do? It senses the presence of a virally infected cell and it activates that cell to produce enzymes which destroys the viral mRNA. So once the mRNA of the virus is destroyed, the mRNA cannot lead to the formation of viral proteins. And if the viral proteins are not formed, the baby viruses cannot be formed. So it is an indirect action of interferon. So interferons act or produces its antiviral action by inhibiting viral transcription or translation is the question that you get. So what would be your answer? Inhibition of viral transcription or translation. Anybody would like to give answer? Will anybody like to give any answer? Nobody seems to be responding. I don't know why. Okay. So it inhibits basically viral translation by destroying the viral mRNA through which it is able to act. Now we come to the last humoral mediator of the innate immune response, that is C-reactive protein, which is also referred to as CRP. This is a beta globulin. It's not an antibody. Antibodies are gamma globulins. It is a beta globulin. It is called a C-reactive protein because it binds to the carbohydrate antigen of Streptococcus pneumoniae. This C stands for carbohydrate antigen. It is synthesized in liver, and in case of any acute inflammation, the levels of CRP rise. And there are various assays that we have for detection of CRP, like latex agglutination is one of the commonly done tests for identification of CRP. So it's a beta globulin, not an antibody. C stands for the carbohydrate antigen of Streptococcus pneumoniae. It is mainly synthesized in liver, and it is one of the acute phase reactants. Acute phase reactant means the levels of certain chemicals which immediately rise in due to the acute inflammation. So it is one of the acute phase reactants. So it is detected by various assays like precipitation and agglutination, mainly latex agglutination test, where you not only detect but also quantify CRP levels. So with this, we are through with the mediators of the innate immune response. Now we come to, we'll touch upon the mediators of the acquired immune response. Same way as we classified the mediators of the innate immune response, here also the acquired immunity mediators are classified both into cellular and humoral. Okay, but obviously the mediators are different. The cellular mediator is B lymphocytes. So let's see. I'll just touch upon these cells. Further details of these cells would be given to you later on in a subsequent session. T lymphocytes are called as T lymphocytes because they mature in the thymus. Thymus, as you might be knowing, is a small organ which is there in the region of the neck, which is not normally visible. So T stands for thymus. The marker for identification of T lymphocyte is CD3. So any cell which has got CD3 on its surface is referred to as a T lymphocyte. So it is a marker for identification of T lymphocytes. Okay. T lymphocytes are further divided into various subsets that you need to know. These are helper T cells and cytotoxic T cells. Helper T cells have got two markers on their surface, CD3 and CD4, whereas cytotoxic T cells have two markers, CD3 and CD8. Hence, helper T cells are also referred to as CD4 positive T lymphocytes. Similarly, cytotoxic T cell is also referred to as CD8 positive T lymphocyte. Okay. Further, helper T cells are further subdivided functional subsets. These are Th1, Th2, and Treg. Th1 is also referred to as T helper 1, which mainly acts against intracellular pathogens, whereas Th2 mainly acts against extracellular pathogens, whereas Treg stands for regulatory T lymphocyte, which basically helps in suppressing the immune response once you've been able to fight off the infection. And now the immune response needs to actually go down because the threat is no longer there. And this is referred to as regulatory T lymphocyte or Treg. So Th1, Th2, Tregs are the functional subsets of helper T cells. And then we've got a cytotoxic T cell, which has got CD8 and CD3 on itself. Cytotoxic T cells have got main action against viruses and cancers. So this has got an antiviral property and the anti-cancer property. Antiviral property and the anti-cancer property. Okay. So let's go on to the next slide. Now we come to B lymphocytes. B lymphocytes, they mature in bone marrow. They mature in bone marrow. So B actually does not stand for B for bone marrow. B actually stands for bursa fabricius. This was the organ in the birds in which they were identified for the first time. So that's why they came to be known as B cells. And unfortunately, bone marrow also starts with B. So actually, the letter B stands for bursa fabricius and not B for bone marrow. The CD markers which are used for identification of B lymphocytes are CD19, 20, and 21. So cell which has got CD19, 20, and 21 on their surface are referred to as B cells. They are referred to as B cells. Okay. These B lymphocytes, this will be taught to you in your subsequent classes, are further differentiated into plasma cells. We call it as a terminal differentiation. Terminal means once they convert into plasma cells, those plasma cells cannot convert back into B lymphocytes. So they convert into plasma cells. This is called as terminal differentiation. The plasma cells in turn secrete antibodies or immunoglobulins. So please remember, this will be a very big topic that will be taught to you in your subsequent classes. What is an antibody, also referred to as an immunoglobulin? A lot of discussion is nowadays going on antibodies with regard to SARS-CoV-2. So please concentrate on these sessions that you're going to have on the structure and function of the antibody, and then you'll realize and be able to relate more effectively in the real life situation. So plasma cells, they secrete these antibodies, and these, they basically act against extracellular pathogens. So there are two main cells of the acquired immune system, T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes. T lymphocytes is part of the cellular acquired or adaptive immune response, whereas B lymphocytes basically is a part of the humoral immune response, because bulk of the antibodies are present in the blood or secretions of the body. So this is just to give you a broad overview of the immune system. Now, all these cells of the immune system that we just talked about, majority of the cells, they arise from the bone marrow, from the pluripotent stem cell, and then they are released into the blood. So the origin of all the immune cells basically is the bone marrow. Some of the cells, once they are released from the bone marrow, they undergo further development in a specialized organ, like the T lymphocyte. So T lymphocyte actually also rises from the bone marrow as a progenitor cell. Then it goes to the thymus and then matures into the T lymphocyte, and then it is released into the circulation. So this is referred to as a thymic education. But ultimate source of all the immune cells in the body mainly happens to be the bone marrow. Okay. Now these lymphocytes, they are arranged in lymphoid organs and tissues, T and B lymphocytes and other lymphocytes. So primary lymphoid organs are two. These are the bone marrow and the thymus. Whereas there is something called as a secondary lymphoid organ. These are like spleen and lymph nodes. These are called as a secondary lymphoid organ. So what is the distinction between a primary and a secondary lymphoid organ? Primary lymphoid organ is the bone marrow and the thymus. These are the organs where the lymphocytes develop. They don't come in contact with the external antigen. Whereas in the secondary lymphoid organs like spleen and lymph nodes, the lymphocytes reach these sites and wait for the antigen encounter to happen. So the place where the antigen encounter happens with the lymphocyte is referred to as a secondary lymphoid organ, whereas where the lymphocytes develop and mature is referred to as a primary lymphoid organ. So there are two main primary lymphoid organs, thymus and bone marrow, whereas secondary lymphoid organs include lymph nodes and the spleen. Okay? And there's also collection of lymphocytes in the mucosal tissue, which is referred to as a mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue. This will be taught to you in your pathology class. So let's cover some questions and let's see whether you are able to answer these questions or not based on the discussion that we just had. So let's see whether you will be able to answer. Which of the following is not a part of the innate immune response? Complement system, NK cell, B lymphocyte, or interferons? Quick answers coming in. Please put in your answers. Please put in your answers. Nobody is answering. It seems all of you have dozed off. So which of the following is not part of the innate immune response? Complement system, NK cell, B lymphocyte, interferons. It is basically the B and the T lymphocyte, which are part of the acquired or adaptive immune response, whereas the rest of the other things are part of the innate immune response. Natural killer cells are members of which of the following families of leukocytes? So I mentioned earlier, natural killer cells are also referred to as null cells. They are also referred to as large granular lymphocytes. They are a special subset of lymphocytes which can neither be classified as T lymphocytes or B lymphocytes. Hence, though they are lymphocytes, they are other than T and B lymphocytes. Monocytes, neutrophils. So natural killer cells are a type of lymphocytes, but they are not T or B lymphocytes, and they are part of the innate immune response. Another difference, where T and B lymphocytes part of the acquired or adaptive immune response. Acquired and adaptive immune response. Okay, we go on to the next question. Pathogen-associated molecular patterns, or PAMs, allow, number one, B and T lymphocytes to recognize bacteria and destroy them, closely resemble host cell surface proteins and sugars, form channels and bacterial membranes, are recognized by pattern recognition receptors of the innate immune system. That's what we have discussed. Pathogen-associated molecular patterns, of PAMs, are recognized by the pattern recognition receptors like toll-like receptors, which are part of the innate immune response, which recognize a broad molecule of a pathogen, which will identify it as, let's say, a major group of pathogen, like let's say a bacterium or a virus, but which one it will not be able to tell. So the answer is D, based on our discussion. Probably you would have understood now. Immunological memory refers to activation of phagocytic cells to ingest microbial invaders, changes in adaptive immune response with subsequent encounters with antigen, constancy of the innate immune response to a particular microbe, recognition of pathogen-associated molecular patterns by TL. So what is memory? We have discussed memory is a part of the innate or acquired immune response. Any answers coming in? It is part of the innate or acquired immune response. If you are listening to the lectures, to the session, memory is a classical feature of only the acquired immune response. So first time you encounter the pathogen, you develop an immune response. Subsequent, when you encounter the same pathogen, the immune response is much more vigorous, much faster, and it's got a better magnitude. So what is it? Changes in the adaptive immune response with subsequent encounters with the antigen. So in subsequent encounters, the immune response is much more vigorous, much better, and faster acting as compared to the primary immune response. And it's a classical feature of the acquired or adaptive immune response. Acquired or adaptive immune response. Last question. Immune recognition of molecules belonging to cells is important to activate NK cells of the innate immune system, stimulate binding by pattern recognition receptors, trigger an attack upon the cells expressing the self molecule, determine the safety of interaction with the molecule. So we discussed again self non-self distinction is a very important feature of again the acquired immune response. So whenever the acquired immune response, that is the T and B lymphocytes are developing in the body, T lymphocytes in the thymus and B lymphocytes in the bone marrow, they first see what are our own cells and learn not to respond to them. So whatever T cells and B cells are left, they can only react with something which is non-self. Okay, so if this mechanism doesn't function properly, this will create a havoc. Your own immune cells are going to in turn damage you. So this is a very important mechanism that the immune response, particularly the acquired immune response, develops to prevent fighting against our own body. And if it fails, you learn later on, it leads to the development of certain group of diseases, which are referred to as uh, autoimmune diseases, where our own immune system ends up damaging us, like rheumatoid arthritis, like systemic lupus erythematosus. All these diseases would be taught to you both in pathology, particularly in pathology, and also be touched upon by us in classes pertaining to immunology. So with this, we are through with this current primer on the immune response and its introduction. If you want to learn more about immunology and concepts related to immunology,